The nights are long, the days are short, and the weather is chilly to downright cold, depending on where you are. It's a good time to slip into a Quince iconic Mongolian cashmere sweaters, which start at only $50. You can treat yourself to everyday luxury at an affordable price with Quince. If you really want to dive into luxury, you can check out their leather handbags, washable silk shirts, and European linen sheet sets. Whatever you're looking for at Quince, all the prices are 50 to 80% less than similar brands, and they do that by partnering directly with top factories and cutting out the middleman. They only work with factories that use safe, ethical, and responsible manufacturing processes. And of course, they use premium fabrics and finishes for that luxury feel in every piece. But you've already heard me rave about my Quince travel pants. Treat yourself this winter without the luxury price tag. Go to quince.com/traveler for 365-day returns plus free shipping on your order. That's QUINCE.com/traveler to get free shipping and 365-day returns. Quince.com/traveler. And thanks to Quince for sponsoring this episode of Amateur Traveler.
This episode is brought to you by State Farm. From your morning podcast to your afternoon playlist, State Farm knows you personalize your entire day, and that's why State Farm helps you personalize your insurance with the State Farm Personal Price Plan. It offers coverage options that help protect what you care about most at an affordable price just for you. Like a good neighbor, State Farm is there. Prices vary by state. Options selected by customer. Availability and eligibility may vary.
This is not your normal Amateur Traveler episode, but a bonus episode, what I'm calling the More Travel episodes. And this one is going to talk about points and miles. What are they? Why would you want them? How do you get them? And how do you use them to get airline flights? I'm your host, Chris Christensen, and strap in. This is going to get geeky. I'd like to welcome the show Tiffany Funk from Point.me, which is a tool that you can use to help find good flights that you can use your airline points for. And this particular bonus episode of Amateur Traveler is going to talk about airline points and those sort of things and why we might want them, how we might get them, and how we would use them. Tiffany, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much.
So your team pitched me having you come on right around the same time as I was thinking about doing an episode. I am someone who has a lot of airline points, collects airline points, and loves to use them. Just as an example, my grandson and his parents, my daughter and son-in-law, are flying here to Christmas on my Southwest airline points. And we want to talk about how we can do those sorts of things. First of all, who should and who shouldn't think about airline points and miles? Who can and who cannot use them?
Oh, I love that. So one of the fun things about my career, I've been in the loyalty and miles and point space for decades now, is that really everyone can take advantage of points. And I think this is one of the things that has been really complicated because in theory, everyone can take advantage of points. As a consumer, particularly in the US, we have a lot of choice when we're making decisions. We have that consumer-driven economy, and brands are really incentivized to drive engagement to their brands. They want to give you carrots to get you to participate in their programs. Mm-hmm. And everyone can theoretically benefit from miles and points. Why we created Point Me is because I had this front row seat to, hey, here's people who want to do stuff with their miles and points. And here are the airlines and credit card programs who also want people to be able to do stuff with their miles and points.
Right.
But there's a really big gap in understanding. And unless you're willing to invest the time to read 30,000 blog posts or watch tons of YouTube videos or go deep in the forums, it hasn't really been accessible for people to understand what points, when, how many points.
It can get a little complicated when you're listening to a points podcast, for instance, and they go into the weeds for how to use their Avios points and whether or not you can use that on this route or that route. Yeah.
Exactly.
Very
and
quickly.
I've been at 1 mile at a time for so long. We're like, Ben has tremendous content around every possible nuance of a program that anyone might want to know. But most people are in a situation like you're just describing Also, I love the prioritization of like my grandson is coming to visit and also his
Oh,
parents.
yeah.
Love that. But most people don't actually care about the nitty gritty. They just
Right.
want to be able to achieve some objective with their points and miles. And that's where Point Me comes in. It's here's how you can just search for your flights, just like you would using Google Flights, see all the different options and what you need to do, and don't worry about the details. And so I think that unlocks like who can use points to pretty much everybody.
Right. Well, I should actually say, as long as we're talking about that, I found the Southwest flights they're flying on for them using Point.me.
I love that.
So I don't have an affiliate account or anything with Point.me. I should because I have a paid account for the tool and it is already paid off with just one flight search. So
yeah, and that's such a great
yeah.
example because, and we're going to start nitty gritty and then we'll zoom out so people don't get overwhelmed. But in that example, so many people have points they don't realize they already have. So I don't know your specific situation, but it's very reasonable that somebody like has Chase points and they've only ever used their Chase points by going to the Chase portal and searching.
Let's back up way back. You're talking to people as if they understood what points are. And we've got at least some people who are like, I think I might be interested. I've heard of them,
okay,
but I don't have any and I don't know how I'd get any and I don't know anything. So
okay, yeah, that's fair.
Let's do points 101 first of all, which was most people who have points that they can use for flights are getting them through, as you mentioned, credit cards that they have something like, and you said Chase points. And what you mean there is any of a number of credit cards that are from the bank Chase. For instance, the Sapphire, which is, I think, probably one of the most recommended starter cards for somebody who's interested in points and miles, that I can, by signing up for that account and spending some amount, and this changes depending on what kind of deal I have, something like if I spend $5,000 in the first 3 months, I can get 60,000 points on Chase. And I don't know what today's offers are on Chase, but that's not an untypical example of what these credit cards are like. Obviously, let's say it up front. If we're talking about somebody doing something with credit cards, don't do this if you're somebody who doesn't pay off your credit cards every month.
Yeah, I was going to actually back up even further than that.
Okay, great.
Yeah, before we even talk about credit cards, let's talk about ways to acquire points that anyone can leverage. And I think that's really important. First step is signing up for these airline loyalty accounts. It doesn't cost
which is free.
anything.
Yeah,
it doesn't cost anything. And I think that's something that most people don't think about. At least for the US programs and like the European programs, it doesn't cost anything. There's you get into some of the Asian programs and there's different rules. So we're not going to talk about those right now. And everyone in the family should sign up for those accounts.
Anybody who is flying should always have a account for the airline they're flying or a partner account. And that's their first level of complication, is that the world is in three camps by and large.
Yes. And I would actually go even further of not even necessarily like people who aren't necessarily immediately flying. And that is because there's so many ways to earn points through non-flying activity.
Oh, okay.
And one of the big ones that I think of right now, and I talk to a lot about for people who have kids, because we're going to we'll talk about credit cards and ways that adults with good credit and a certain level of
good credit habits. Yep.
Financial flexibility can earn more points more quickly with credit cards. But that's not everyone. There are people who are not going to do the credit card thing for various reasons. And then there are also children who are not going to be eligible to participate.
Right.
But you can still earn points through lots of different ways. One of my favorite ways, and I think this is relevant this time of year when people are doing shopping, are shopping portals. So like American Advantage, United Mileage Plus, Alaska Mileage Plan. Southwest also does it, but these airlines have shopping portals where basically they're getting a commission from a retailer when you're doing online shopping. And they effectively are splitting that commission with you in the form of miles and points. So if you have your 8-year-old and they have a Southwest account, you can go to the Southwest shopping portal and you can say, I was going to make this purchase at Old Navy or Best Buy. It's the time of year where people are buying TVs and things like that. And you can go in, you can log in with their frequent flyer account, and you can earn maybe only 1 or 2 extra miles per dollar on that purchase. It doesn't have to be a huge amount. It's going to add up over time. And then you're putting miles in that account of that person who can't take advantage of some of the credit card complexities or the other things like that. And it can be a really good way, even if you were just consistent about doing like your back to school shopping or every Macy's trip and doing that buy online, pick up in store option if you're picking it up in person rather than having it shipped. The points really rack up quickly. Another no-brainer one, I live in Washington State, and Delta has a deal with the Seahawks, where if you have a Delta SkyMiles account and you have to click a link to enroll, every time the Seahawks score a touchdown, you get some points. And so
not a lot of points.
Not a lot of points, but it's enough points to keep your miles from expiring. It doesn't cost you anything. It costs you the 7 minutes that it takes to go through and have everyone in your family click on the yes, enroll me to get free points when the Seahawks score. So there's always those little things like that. It can be worth signing up for the loyalty programs. In my house, we have an email address that these all go to so that we can keep track of all of that. And it just makes it easy to go through and enroll in the thing of the month or the week and keep it more manageable.
One question we should ask, or answer rather, both, is why do airlines do this? United, American, Delta, they've all got their programs, plus all the international carriers. Why does United, for instance, first of all, have a mileage program? And second of all, why are they giving away points when I get credit cards or when people score touchdowns or when I dine at certain restaurants? What's that all about?
Oh man, how deep do you want to go? The real answer to why does United have a loyalty program is because American launched a loyalty program in the 70s during deregulation and came up with a loyalty program. And then United was like, oh no, and had Mileage Plus like 10 days later. So that's the first reason. But I mentioned that because that time of the late 70s and deregulation.
I remember deregulation. I am old enough. I flew before deregulation.
Yeah, I am not. But the answer then is still the answer now, where when you had that highly regulated market where carriers were only allowed to fly certain routes at certain prices at certain times, it was very contracted. When that exploded into the free market, airline marketing executives had to find new ways to fill unsold seats.
Right.
And that's something we talk about in the industry.
In regulation, just for those of us who lived through it or those who didn't, who don't know what it, if I flew from San Francisco to New York, then there was a fee of how much I would pay. And it really wouldn't matter which airline I flew on. And if I flew longer, I would pay more. And if I flew shorter, I would pay less, which is something that is not always the case today. Today, we let the market decide.
Exactly. There was a government fee schedule. Works the same way that tomato and coffee prices work in Italy, where they say, this is the amount that you're allowed to charge, more, no less. And so carriers would compete with the government for routes and rates, but for a consumer, it was just like, this is the price. So we use the term in the travel industry of perishable inventory. And you're familiar with this, even if you're not in travel, because this is also how the day-old bread section works at your bakery or your grocery store. Once the door is closed on that flight, they're not making money for any empty seats. There's no opportunity to, after the fact, there's no day old flight sale. You can't just.
I like the idea, though. I like
right.
The idea.
Hey, if you too late, but if you want to fly last week, we can give you a great deal. And the goal of an airline, if you are trying to operate as efficiently as possible, or for a hotel, we're talking about airlines, is for every seat on that 737 to go out with a passenger who paid the most that they were possibly willing to pay from an economic perspective. So the highest price that they were willing to pay. That's how airlines set their prices.
And this is why this flight on the same airline, that not everyone in those seats is paying the same amount, because you pay more or less depending on when you buy.
Correct.
You pay more or less about how you buy and through what mechanism you buy that seat. Even if I'm getting the same meal or the same lack of meal or going to the same destination, there are people who make a living at the airline optimizing that revenue and figuring out when to raise prices and when to lower prices. And I've worked with some of them, and it's a fascinating discussion to
It's
talk through.
fascinating. It's
Yeah.
so much math that goes into it. And it's so interesting, especially with modern technology, how that's evolved and has
Right.
made it possible to do more things. So there's so much that goes into it. But the end goal is you don't want the seats empty. And that's really where the loyalty programs came from. We're like, okay, how do we reduce the potential number of empty seats? And we could spend a lot of time on the sort of mileage mania that happened in the 80s with regards to loyalty programs, like the different things that people have done to try and really maximize and incentivize this. But ultimately, flying airplanes and operating them is expensive. There's a lot of costs associated with pilots and flight attendants and fees and fuel. And so this has created an environment where the loyalty programs are profit centers for the airlines because they're don't have many,
just profit centers. They are the profit center for at least all the major U.S. airlines. It's fascinating. So when I was a director of engineering for TripAdvisor for their flights product back in the day. And when I was doing that, I remember hearing that the average profit per passenger on a U.S. domestic flight was $5.
Yeah.
And you may remember that a lot of airlines had gone in and out of bankruptcy. Spirit just did yesterday, but that we haven't had as much of that lately. And one of the reasons why is if you look at the breakdown of profits by especially the U.S. major airlines, their vast source of profits is selling points and doing airline credit cards.
Yes. And that also leads to situations where, one of the ways that an airline can avoid bankruptcy or financial insolvency is they also have these loyalty programs, which are mortgageable. And that's something that we see a lot of, where not just in the US or in different countries, everyone handled it differently. In 2020, we're not able to operate flights at the same cadence. We need an influx of cash, and we're putting up the loyalty program as collateral for a loan.
Right.
It was a very common posturing and something we often see when an airline, even when an airline does go bankrupt, the assets and the benefit of the loyalty program and the customer lists and the lucrativeness of that is an asset that can be leveraged to better handle a merger with another airline or other ways of bringing all of that together.
Konnichiwa, I'm Yuki, a tour leader with Explore. Who knew that hidden among Tokyo's towering skyscrapers was a peaceful tea house surrounded by ancient trees and serene ponds? Actually, I knew. It was my mother's secret sanctuary. Not everyone knows about Tokyo's Hamarikyu Gardens. Arigatou gozaimasu. But you will if you explore. Search exploreworldwide.com and don't just travel, explore.
Hey there, Ryan Reynolds here. It's a new year, and you know what that means. No, not the diet. Resolutions. A way for us all to try and do a little bit better than we did last year. And my resolution, unlike big wireless, is to not be a raging and raise the price of wireless on you every chance I get. Give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
$45 upfront payment required, equivalent to $15 per month. New customers on first 3-month plan only. Taxes and fees extra. Speed slower above 40 gigabytes on unlimited. See mintmobile.com for details.
And when an airline and a bank work together, the airline is offering those unsold seats as an asset, getting money from the bank to have their credit card with the Delta American Express credit card, for instance, or the American Airlines Barclay card or something like that. That is a source of revenue for them. And that's one of the reasons why when we talk about points, we talk so much about credit cards is it's important to the airlines. And so they do all sorts of things. If you have the airline credit card, you don't have to pay for your luggage. Their first 2 bags are free, or you can board early, or things like that are benefits that they're doing so that they sell their credit card so that they make money as an airline. So Anyway, that being said.
Exactly. And it's huge. It's estimated, for example, that 1% of the US GDP gets put on a Delta SkyMiles American Express co-branded card. Like this, it's a massive industry. Yeah. Isn't that a fun fact?
I did not know that. I worked for 2 years at American Express. That fact I had not heard.
Yeah. So just the scale of this is really big. But since we're talking about credit cards, I think it's really important to talk about why these credit cards are lucrative.
Yeah.
And they're lucrative because they can afford to be. And the reason why they can afford to be is that these are also the credit cards that have higher annual fees, and very high interest rates. Yeah, double sometimes compared to other credit cards that might be out there. So it really
not that there are a lot of credit cards with low interest rates, which is why I say pay off your credit cards every month. But yeah.
Yeah, the reality is that there is a large cohort of Americans who do not pay their credit cards off every month. Some months, right? Especially as we start getting into this time of year, there are people who are going to float for a couple of months. And
those are the people who are subsidizing my travel.
So without being judgy about that, I think it's important to say, if that's you or that's a situation that you anticipate doing, do not do those activities on these high reward travel cards, because the interest rates can be like 30%. And so that's going to eat up any value that you might otherwise be getting from the miles and points. So if that's your situation, just get a different card for that situation, something that is low interest, that doesn't penalize you if you have to put something on revolve for a couple of months. These cards should only be used when you're able to pay them off in full every month, because otherwise you will just lose out. The math doesn't math.
Right. No, I'm serious that the people who are not paying off their Delta card or whatever card every month are the ones who are subsidizing the programs.
Yeah.
So it's great if you're the one who is, because you're the one who's getting the benefit of that. It's not great if you're the one who's paying for it. So, okay. I understand now that there are points, and that the other thing we should say is that I can use them to get flights. That's a way that in the travel space, we use points predominantly, but not solely. And I don't even know if we're going to get into all the other ways I can use points to get the blender or magazine subscriptions or all those other things. But a good way to use them is get flights.
Yeah. The advice that I generally give is, let's talk about, there's 80 million people in the US household who are using a points earning credit card. And so I think it's important to define points in that way. If you have things like, let's say, a Costco credit card, those points can really only be used for essentially cash back through sort of Costco's way of doing things. And you get a penny a point. And in general, when you are redeeming for merchandise or things like that, you're not even getting a penny a point. You're getting like half a point or half a cent.
And the penny a point is a good rule of thumb as you're valuing points. If you're not getting a penny a point, that might not be a good way to spend your points.
Yeah. And I think there's also if you're only getting a penny a point, you should just be using a cash back card and get something like where you're just getting 2 times cash back from your local credit union and move on with your life and not worry about this.
Which is a fine thing.
Yeah, like that's a fine thing to do. When people are using Point Me, we generally see people getting like at least 6 to 12 cents per point. Some people are getting way more. It depends on the flight and the trip. And you can get 30 cents a point if you're doing something like, this summer we went to Wales and we flew British Airways first class, and it was like a great rate and all of that. And there was a transfer bonus. There's ways to really just blow this out of the water and have it be really lucrative. But I think when you're starting at the beginning, you should think about, it's very possible to earn more than 1 point for every dollar you spend as a consumer, whether that's with a credit card or using a shopping portal or like all of the different things. And so you should be getting more than 1 point per dollar you spend, and you should be getting more than 1 cent in value when you go to redeem. So if you're redeeming for like magazines and toasters, you're better off just getting the 2% cashback card and just doing it that way. A little bit of algebra, but it's useful algebra for everyone to be able
I'm thinking I want to sort of do this. It's like, how do you do points 101 and where do you start and how do you pull the thread here? That I want to start with, there are flights that I want to get and they're going to be a certain number of points. And then I want to go to, how do I get points? And then I want to go to, how do I optimize spending points? Does that make sense to you?
Yeah. Okay. That's definitely something we can do.
So let's start with the fact that, as stated fact, that I can use my points in general. If I have points in United's Mileage Plus program, I'm generally collecting them there so I can use them to get United flights or flights for United's partners. And every airline has a set of partners, and there's 3 main alliances. with one of
Chris, you
the.
are no longer doing points 101. You are doing points like
I,
500
I just
graduate level.
want to state it and say that. So Delta, for instance, American and United, I'm not going to be using my United points on Delta. I'm not going to be using my American points on United. These are three separate things, but there are other international carriers that would be associated. So I'm going to need points. How do I get points? How do most people, if you say, hey, I want to get involved in this, I'm going to open up my things. I'm going to get a point every time the Seahawks get a touchdown, but I need, say, 40,000, 50,000 points. That's the Seahawk touchdown doesn't get me very far. So most people are doing those with credit cards. How would you advise somebody get started?
Yeah, so I think the first place to get started, and this is why we've set things up this way. So anybody can go to PointMe, to the point.me, and you can create a free account, and that opens up something that we call Explore. And with that, you can say, you know what, I'm in Cincinnati and I'm really curious. I want to go to any beach. I don't care. It's cold. It's winter. I want to go to any beach in February. And you can see the points prices that other people are finding around those dates. And I think that's a really helpful.
And that will change over time. So if I'm looking for a flight for next summer and I search today, that's how many points it would take me if I bought it today.
Right. It's the prices that the people are seeing. And it can always change. It can evolve. The prices get lower and higher. But I think when you're talking about somebody who doesn't know anything about miles and points and is actually maybe not even quite points curious, but you're just trying to figure out, is the juice worth the squeeze? Do I even want to start thinking about this? I think that's so helpful. And it's why we make it free, to just be like, okay, I don't even know, is 50,000 points a lot? Is that good?
Right.
Like, I have so many questions. And so I think that's really helpful to just be able to get those benchmarks and set those goalposts. We're not saying, hey, here's something you can get, but nobody knows how much things cost with points.
Right.
As a rule, right? Because it's not something that takes up space in like society's collective brain, where there's other things that we just know. And this is not something that we just know. So I think that's a good starting point, and to just get a sense of, okay, domestic spring break travel can be a lot of points. You might be surprised to see that. I always use this, like, it's less expensive to go to Europe in business class over Thanksgiving than it is to go anywhere domestically in economy, because of that unsold seats, right? And business travelers aren't traveling over Thanksgiving. Okay. But everyone wants to go and see their grandparents. So it's just like, you can start to get a sense of what's out there and the possibility. And I think that then gives you a framework for making decisions around the activities you want to engage in with miles and points. So do you want to get that credit card? Because now you see that this credit card will get you 70,000 of X currency. Is it United miles or Chase points or Amex points? And if you know what 70,000 can actually buy you, you're able to make a more informed choice as a consumer.
Right. And let's just say where your product, for instance, is not the only thing in the market. There are other things that can do similar sort of things, although it does it very well. So that's why I recommend it. But I could go to United, for instance, and I could do a search for United for how many dollars it will take me to fly from New York to San Francisco, and how many points it would take, how many United mileage plus miles it would take. Mm-hmm. What I can do at point.me is I can say, I have points on these programs. Tell me all the different airlines that I could use my points for in one search. So,
and it's and it's especially for this entry point, like there isn't really anything that's going to give you those benchmarks within like the programs themselves. And I think most of us, when we're buying paid tickets these days, we're not going first to Delta or United or American or Southwest or Alaska. We're going to Google Flights. And so that's you're going there,
or
you're
Kayak or something, or Skyscanner or something. Yeah, exactly.
You're looking at those aggregators, and they're called, the technical term I think is more of that meta search engine.
Yeah, a meta search engine being a search engine that searches multiple places.
And so
having run a meta search engine.
There you go. And when in PointMe for our subscribers, we do that. We do it with an extremely high degree of accuracy. We have to, because we partner with financial institutions. Right. So we're able to look at...
Speaking of partner with financial institutions, I understand, and you can tell me if this is correct or not. I can get a free account by going to point.me, so I could use that, but that I can also get a slightly better account if I have an American Express credit card also for free?
We do have a white label partnership with American Express. It's a limited complimentary experience, which basically means that you can go to point.me/Amex. And if you have a membership rewards earning card, it's not every American Express card. They're also a payment processing network. But if you have a membership rewards card, if you have one, you probably know what that means. You can go there and you log in through Amex, and then you see like a version of Point Me for membership rewards. You'll only see the flights that are available using your membership rewards points. So it won't show you things with your other miles and points for other credit cards or airlines that don't partner with Amex.
Okay.
But that's a great option for people too.
If they have that set of cards. So when you say a membership, and I'm going to get slightly into 201 here from 101. When you say the membership earning cards, you're talking about the ones that earn Amex points versus, for instance, the Amex Hilton card, which earns Hilton points.
Yeah, correct. So yeah, it's got to be a.
Got it. So I'm talking about the green, the gold, the platinum, the cards in that line of cards.
Yes, and their business friends.
And the business cards. That makes sense.
Yes, and that's also an important distinction because, Chris, obviously this was of your background, but there are the cards issued by American Express, and then there are the cards that are on American Express's payment network. So you already have two buckets, and then within the cards issued by American Express,
and that's way past 101 there.
Yeah, there's the ones like this just gets into like.
I only know that because I worked for American Express. Yeah.
But if you have a membership rewards card or you're earning Amex points, that would be you.
So I've got an idea of how many points I want to do for that trip that I want to do. So then we get where do I get started with earning those points?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of resources out there. There's also a lot of misinformation out there, which is really hard for me. And it's because I have been in the miles and points space. Like it has been my career for so long. You mentioned the Chase Sapphire Preferred as being such a popular card. I have been working in miles and points longer than the Chase Sapphire Preferred has been a card. And so the proliferation of content creators and influencers and just things that are out there nowadays about credit cards does give me hives a little bit because there's so much of, okay, you see somebody and they're going and they're taking this flight and they're bringing like their portable Christmas lights to make the business class cabin look extra glowy to make their TikTok look good. And like, then that person is also giving you financial advice. And it just makes me uncomfortable, even though like it's beautiful content. Like I cannot complain around the aesthetics of it. It's of course perfect. And they might be very qualified, but that's the stuff that trends and gets so much attention. And so one of the things that I found is we have a lot of people who are starting their miles and points journey frustrated because of where they've been getting their beginner information.
Okay.
It's hard. If you're really interested in this, there are some resources that are better than others. I don't know that I know.
Where would you send people for more information?
Yeah. So we're trying to build up more of this on Point, but I think there are some trusted sources. It's a little bit my biases because I also love these people as humans. But like
that's okay.
1 mile at a time and View from the Wing do a pretty good job of being like, this is an inflated points value. Like they're pretty transparent around their editorial intentions. So I think that's important. Like, how is this person getting paid? Is such an important thing in life to know whether or not you're getting good advice. We think about that with other media, especially now that we live in a landscape where engagement is monetized. So what is incentivizing this?
As somebody who's trying to do that,
yeah, exactly. And so I think it's important to know, like, how does this voice make money?
Yeah.
And so I would look for resources and try and talk about things outside of Point Me, but look for resources where it is transparent how they are making money. At Point Me, like you pay us. We work for the consumer. And so that is the relationship. We work for you.
Right.
And we do have a team of points advisors who will, like, they can actually sit down and do a deep dive with somebody. Where are you spending? Where do you want to go? Let's figure out like a points earning strategy that makes sense for you. And people love that. And they start earning hundreds of thousands of miles a year without having to put in the brain to learn around it.
The last thing you want to hear when you need your auto insurance most is a robot with countless irrelevant menu options. Which is why with USAA Auto Insurance, you'll get great service that is easy and reliable, all at the touch of a button. Get a quote today. Restrictions apply.
USAA. This episode is brought to you by Indeed. We're driven by the search for better, but when it comes to hiring, the best way to search for a candidate isn't to search at all. Don't search, match with Indeed. Use Indeed for scheduling, screening, and messaging so you can connect with candidates faster. Listeners of this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to get your jobs more visibility at Indeed.com/SBO. Terms and conditions apply.
But you can also DIY this. I would just be really conscientious about where you get information. What are people promising you as the carrot? Anybody who's telling you like, hey, just get this credit card and then you can do this without telling you that it's complicated or the inventory is limited or
How
it
about this?
requires an amount of flexibility that people on a W-2 do not have.
I will tell you what I tell my friends, and then you can critique me. How's that
Okay.
sound?
Fair.
We'll give you the editor chancer. So when I talk to people who are not using credit cards at all, they're just using something else. They're not getting any points at all. One of the things I ask is, where do you live? And therefore, what airlines are you likely to fly? For instance, if you live in Minneapolis, you are more likely going to be a Delta flyer just because of the availability of routes from where you live. Where I live, that is not a good option. In San Francisco, I've got great connectivity on American, Alaskan, United, and less so on Delta. And so I'm not looking at flying on Delta, and therefore I'm not looking to earn Delta miles.
To correct you on your own podcast.
This is why I brought you on. Feel free to correct me on my own podcast.
Yeah, this is something that
if I didn't think you knew more, you would not be here.
Yeah, this is something that I hear a lot, and people fall into this trap. Like, I live in Atlanta, so I have to earn Sky Miles. The problem is now you are competing with everybody else in Atlanta who has the same bucket of Sky Miles.
That is true.
Fly the same flight. Versus if you have American miles and you're in Delta, like, you're set. You can get whatever flight you want. There's going to be seats available because you're not competing as much.
Interesting.
In general, I would say you should only get an Airlines credit card. That should not be your first card if you're wanting to earn.
I agree.
You get the airline cards because you're traveling a lot on that airline and you want the free checked bags, or you want like the priority boarding, or like,
I want a boarding group too instead of
don't spend money on those cards as your first stop. What I think is better, and the advice that we always give, is to instead look for one of the credit cards that is in one of these bank credit card rewards programs.
Okay. That's where I was going to go next, but
flexible points. So those are the American Express membership rewards cards we were just talking about, the Chase Ultimate Rewards cards like the Sapphire and the Sapphire Reserve, or the Ink cards if you're a business owner, Capital One cards that like the Capital One Venture suite of products. Those can also be transferred to airline partners. The Built Rewards
and let's pause there for a second, because that was a very important sentence, that those can be transferred to airline partners. And we need to explain what you mean there.
I'm going to. If we can. So I also only have 10 more minutes, so maybe we can.
Okay.
Okay. So let me go back. So when you're looking at these bank credit card programs, and I'm going to use some vocab words. It's okay if you don't know all of them right away. It's fine. So when we say bank credit card rewards program, we're not just talking about any points. We're not talking about any bank. We're talking about some of these bigger programs that have what are called flexible points. And I'll explain what that means here in a second. But that's going to be things like your American Express membership rewards cards that we were talking about, your Chase Ultimate Rewards cards. That's like the Sapphire and the Ink cards and things like that we were mentioning. Capital One's venture cards, there's personal and business, and there's different tiers of them. City cards that earn thank you points. That's like a big asterisk. The city cards are complicated. That should probably not be the first stop.
No, probably not your first card. Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, because it's a little more complicated. The Built Rewards card is a great option if you're a renter. And what makes these cards...
One for renters is that renters who can pay for their rent with a credit card.
Right. Yeah. And they have some other limit if your landlord doesn't necessarily accept credit cards. Like they've got some ways to back end it. So if you rent, it's a really good option. And all of these currencies, and I do like to think of points as a currency to unlock that spending power that you have in your wallet. All of these currencies are helpful because they're flexible, which means that you can use your points in a variety of ways. You're not locked in. If you have a credit card that's earning United miles, you're locked in. You're earning United miles. If you have a Chase Ultimate Rewards card, You can transfer those points to United Mileage Plus, but you
Right.
can also transfer them to 10 other airlines, or to Southwest, or to Air France Flying Blue. And you might not think that you would ever need to transfer points to Air France Flying Blue. And I'm just telling you, do not worry about that yet if this is your first step.
Right.
Like, just think about, rather than trying to pick a single stock and find like the best single stock on the market, you're going to buy a mutual fund instead. And that's what these credit card programs let you do, is they basically let you push off the decision of how you're going to use your points until later. And so it's just a much easier entry point. It lets you diversify. You're not having to think about, what airline am I going to fly most often? It just doesn't matter. And then when you're ready to book a trip, when you've accumulated these points, also you can generally earn them faster, because these cards will offer 2 times points on this and 4 times points on that. You earn points.
Right. Depending on the card, it might be groceries I earn 2 times,
or dining, or cell phones, or you find one that matches your spending in your life there.
Right.
You'll earn a lot more points.
And
then
these cards will
using them.
tend to, or always, I'm thinking, have a annual fee.
Always. For the most, like 90% of them have an annual fee.
Yeah, I can't come up with any that don't in this set of things that we're talking about here.
Oh, I'm happy to be like, the Amex Everyday card is a no annual fee card.
Okay, there you go. I should have
does
known
earn
that.
membership rewards points, and they are transferable. Yeah, the Built card also doesn't have an annual fee. But yeah, generally, the higher the annual fee, the more points you're going to earn when using the card. So that's a little bit of the dynamic there. They can afford to be more lucrative, because you're.
And when we talk about annual fees, we're talking about anywhere from $99 is pretty typical. I think the Chase Sapphire is $99, and then when you get to the Amex Platinum, you're up to now like $700.
Yeah, and the Amex Platinum should also not be your first card.
No,
probably your third card.
And the reason why they justify paying that much for that one isn't just that you earn points more, but they have bonuses, as all of these do, that because you have this credit card, you can also get it
unlocks like some luxury perks and some other things that are like really helpful. I have an Amex Platinum, and as the company, we have the business platinum as well. And it makes sense for our spending patterns and like the other things it unlocks. Right. But they should not be your first couple of cards. Typically.
No, agreed. Okay. So I've got a card. When I got that card, I'm going to have some sort of, if I spend $5,000 in the first 3 months, I'm going to get 60, 80, 100,000 points. So now I've got a bank of points. There are people who go crazy and get 100 cards. I'm not necessarily recommending that to anybody who listens. Let's start with this. And then I look at how I can spend my points. And tools like point.me help me figure out how to spend my points that I have now, my hard-earned points. And we're capping this at this point just because of your time. Anything else we need to talk about in terms of kind of points 101? I'm just getting into this. I think I might be interested, either the where I go next or what else I need to know before I start filling out credit card applications.
Oh gosh, yeah. And again, I don't think the credit card application should be in the first chunk of steps for most people. It's more like think about where you want to go and things like that.
Yep.
I think one of the things that I find people get frustrated by with points is they didn't have information up front. So I think if you are points curious, or you're wanting that, it's educating yourself and understanding not just the possibilities, because the possibilities are endless, but the probabilities. And that's why I think it's so helpful to look and see what.
Got it.
If you want to fly on the first Saturday of spring break, along with everyone else in your school district, to Hawaii, those flights are going to be expensive. They're going to be expensive with cash. They're going to be expensive with points. And I think that's important to know. Like, for a certain number of points, just like it works with dollars, the airlines will accommodate any lack of flexibility that you have. And I think that's important to know. So if you don't have a lot of flexibility, and I talk to mid-career families all the time who have no flexibility. They can go on the Saturday of spring break and they can come back the following Saturday because that's when they can travel.
Right.
I think it's important to know that, because you are not going to find points deals. That's just not going to be your life right now. And you need to know that. And so you want to handle it on the earning side. And so if you want to invest your energy into, okay, how do I make the most out of my points in that situation, where you want to read up more, where you want to spend more time becoming educated and getting savvy with points is on how do I maximize the points that I'm earning?
Right.
Because you are going to be spending more for those flights given that constraint. If you are someone who's retired and you can fly on a Tuesday, you can fly on a Tuesday in May. Like, you don't need to go anywhere in particular at any particular time. You probably also are not spending as much in your day-to-day life as a mid-career family. Your household expenses are probably lower.
Yeah.
So for that persona, it makes sense for you to spend more time learning about your redemption options and how to find deals, because you have the capacity to take advantage of those deals, and you don't have the capacity to earn as many points. So I think it's important to know, like, to self-identify of, are you going to be a high earner or a low redeemer, and be able to structure your process that way.
And the only other thing I can think of in terms of spending points to get flights in particular, as we start to wrap this up, is, so studies have shown, and I don't know if this is still true, but it used to be that, in terms of buying flights with dollars, that on average about 6 weeks before was going to be your sweet spot. Again, it depends, and I don't know if that's still the rule of thumb anymore. But with points, that's not going to be the case.
No, because that's when people are buying flights with cash.
So it's going to be really early, like a year ahead, or 2 years ahead even.
You can't buy points. You can't buy flights more than 11 months ahead. For most,
so long time,
airlines.
or oddly enough, last minute.
Yeah, last minute. But I will say that with the caveat of last minute is very different now than it was in 2019. Flights are full. More people are traveling than have ever traveled in human history on fewer airplanes than we had in 2019.
And I wouldn't count on last minute. But for instance, when Delta had their meltdown, well, it wasn't just Delta, but
everyone had their meltdown.
Everybody had their meltdown. What was it, August?
It was July, yeah. I was actually flying back from the UK that day.
I was supposed to fly a Delta flight on that day, and all the Delta flights ended up getting canceled because of this computer geeky thing that went wrong. And I won't try and explain what happened there. I ended up flying back home from Florida for 14,000 miles in first class on American, because it was last minute and nobody was trying to do that route.
Exactly.
It was luck.
Yeah.
It wouldn't be something you could count on.
Inventory, right? The airline doesn't want the seat to go out empty.
Exactly.
And so they use really complicated algorithms, a lot of machine learning these days even, to determine what is the probability that this flight is not going to go out full. And that's how they determine the prices for cash, the prices for points, how much space is available. So like I mentioned that we went to Wales this summer. We went to the UK without having return flights. And no one else should do that. But I have that level of confidence and understanding and we have flexibility. We both work remotely.
Right.
The dog was with her grandma. So it didn't matter if we came back Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday. It didn't matter. We were prepared to be able to work there. And I had high confidence that given the density of flights between London and the west coast of the US, we're also in Spokane. So it's not like anyone flies to Spokane, and it's the same for us to fly to Seattle or Portland or San Francisco or LA or Salt Lake or Denver. It doesn't matter. So like we have that kind of flexibility. And so it was possible for us to just keep an eye on it and then, okay, here's the flight that we're interested in at the price we want to take. And I think we booked it like 48 hours before. That's not something that you can count on anymore, like unless you're me. But I think takeaway for people there is points tickets are so flexible. They don't have all of the punitive fees as paid tickets. So if you see something that looks good with your points, book it and then keep an eye on it. And as it gets closer to departure, if you have some flexibility, like you can always rebook it for a day before, a day after, or earlier in the day or later in the day at a lower price if that comes up.
For most airlines, you can do that and even get all the fees back. Some airlines, there's
for some airlines, there might be like a $50 or $100 change fee, but nowadays it's really easy for most of these programs to make those changes. And so I think that's the last minute takeaway for like your average traveler is if you see something that looks good, book it. It's low stress to change it later.
Well, Tiffany, I know you've got to go, but I appreciate you coming and talking to us. Anything else you want to say about points.me before we leave here? Give you a chance to plug. I think we plugged it a few times.
Yeah, I think we've talked about it. I would really emphasize that we're trying to solve a problem for this industry that we're pretty intimately familiar with. We really understand the customer pain points and are trying to address that and make it easier for people to find those better flights for fewer points without having to be so stressed about it, because we recognize that if everyone has points and no one really knows how to use them, it can be really complicated. So I think it is a good first stop. If this is interesting to you and you want to be able to do more but are not necessarily a DIYer, we have some of the world's best experts in miles and points who are happy to sit down with you and do consulting stuff. If you are a DIYer, we've got the self-serve tool that works like Google Flights, to where you can see all the options available with you. And we give you like the step-by-step instructions with videos and clips. So you can't go wrong if you are somebody who likes following technical documentation and walking through it. We try to make it pretty easy for people.
Excellent. Our guest again has been Tiffany Funk from Point.me. And thanks so much for coming on Amateur Traveler and sharing with us the tip of your knowledge in the points and miles space.
Iceberg. Yeah, of course. Thanks for having me.
This episode is brought to you by Peloton. If you're looking for flexible workouts, Peloton's got you covered. Summer runs or playoff season meditations. Whatever your vibe, Peloton has thousands of classes built to push you and has something there to adapt with you, whether you need a challenge or rest. Peloton has everything you need whenever you need it. Find your push. Find your power. Peloton. Visit onepeloton.com.
This episode is brought to you by Amazon. Sometimes the most painful part of getting sick is the getting better part. Waiting on hold for an appointment, sitting in crowded waiting rooms, standing in line at the pharmacy, that's painful. Amazon One Medical and Amazon Pharmacy remove those painful parts of getting better with things like 24/7 virtual visits and prescriptions delivered to your door. Thanks to Amazon Pharmacy and Amazon One Medical, healthcare just got less painful.
I have a late-minute addition to this show. After I'd already scheduled it to be published, I heard from Point.me, and they sent me some promo codes that you can use to save money. So if you want to get a 1-month subscription for only $5 instead of $12, you can use the code AmateurTraveler5. Or if you want to get an annual subscription, you can use the code AmateurTraveler20. I don't know what you saved with the Amateur Traveler 20, but you can check that out if you're interested in learning more about Point.me. Thanks to Tiffany, and thanks to the patrons of the show who help support Amateur Traveler financially. If you're interested in becoming a patron of the show, go to patreon.com/amateurtraveler to learn more. I just got off a Zoom call with some of the patrons today, and I really enjoy those monthly connections. So I hope you enjoyed that episode on Points and Miles. There's obviously much, much more that can be said. I will say that I'm not planning on turning Amateur Traveler into a Points and Mile podcast. There are plenty of those out there. I know one of the listeners called Amateur Traveler the last honest travel podcast because we don't talk about points and miles that much. I am not planning on changing that, but I thought you'd find this interesting. Let me know what you think, and also let me know what other episodes you'd like to see on these more travel episodes. With that, we're going to end this episode of Amateur Traveler. If you have any questions, send an email to host@amateurtraveler.com, or better yet, leave a comment on this episode at amateurtraveler.com. And thanks so much for listening.